Enturu School is probably, I think, it might be the only African school where you'll find two sitting presidents. What is so special? What do you think is special about that place?
There was a lot of empowerment that went on outside of the purely academic context. That's the first thing. The other thing is that those men who were there in exile, including His Excellency the President of Rwanda, in a kind of exile, they all say the amazing thing about being at Ntare School was we were strangers in a strange land and we were treated as equals. We were welcomed. The first thing about those exams, besides that negative effect they have on students' mental health and this undue pressure that they exert on young people, is that they have no real connection to the real world, right? So they're a completely artificial construct. And so if we're giving young people the opportunity to show us what they've learned, let's do it in more dynamic, more authentic ways.
You're dealing with kids coming from backgrounds that are very different from yours. They're not coming from an IB system. A lot of them are coming from our Rwandan primary school system. What has been that single hardest mindset to change with these kids coming from local schools?
The biggest quality that's challenging or inhibiting for learners in this particular cultural context in Rwanda is the fear. Rwandan learners are not risk takers. In fact, they are the opposite of risk takers from my perspective. The fear goes away very quickly at our school, and they get used to interacting with teachers in a positive way, developing that positive rapport that's so essential for learning.
This is the very best. I introduce the very next big deal. You know this is the big league. Unsanga mu mihanda ya Kigali, mega big fish. Word on the street turakaze. Habari gani mumeze mute? Yutse nshima Imana kuva nkunda mukiye. If you want the long form, come close ndabure. Wait, what?
The long form.
What did he say?
The long form.
What?
The long form.
The long form. Hello there. My guest this week on the Long Form podcast is Damien Vassallo. Damien is the head of school and CEO of Ntare Louisenlund International School in Bugesera, Rwanda. In this week's conversation, we discuss his personal journey, academic inequality, the effects of Rwanda's educational reforms on learners, and the fears that teachers have about AI. Before we jump into today's episode, I want to make a deal with you. About 69.5% of you who watched this very podcast haven't hit the subscribe button yet. So here's the deal I want to make with you. If you hit that subscribe button today, I promise you that my team and I will keep making the show better and better in every single way. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button today. And now, let's get into the show. Headmaster Damien, although, do you say headmaster still?
So, okay, that's a good
Is it school? Is it
introductory
director
question.
of school? Is it?
So the more modern term that I've embraced as my title is head of school.
Head of school.
So headmaster is a more traditional way of saying it, and some people say it has negative undertones, and so I don't reject the term. Particularly, people in more traditional cultures will call me headmaster. Although it seems that in Rwanda the term principal is the more common term, and I don't like being called the principal because we have positions that are also in our organizational chart called principal. They do different things than me, and they're my deputy head of school.
Yeah.
So.
No.
So head of school.
Head of school.
Thank you.
Headmaster Damien. You know, when I was a young man, when I was much younger. When I never thought that one day I'd be sitting across, because I don't think I would have been called a good student. Mm-hmm. I was a naughty student. I was, when the headmaster was calling me in, it was not because of I'd done something right. It was usually because I had dodged class, or I was seen frolicking somewhere that I shouldn't have. But it's a huge pleasure to have you. This is a conversation that's a long time coming. Mm-hmm. A few weekends ago, you invited me to the school, Ntare Louisenlund.
Pleasure to have you.
Which is a big deal because, one, as myself, I just was curious to see what that kind of school was like, and also because my father was from the original Ntare, the Ugandan Enturu School. So it was kind of interesting to kind of see the latest iteration of the idea of Enturu School.
That's right, yeah.
And listen, as I told you that day, the school did not feel like a secondary school. It felt like a really nice university. I literally felt jealous of 13-year-olds. I was like, how could they have had such a great, how do they get to have this? How do they get to have swimming pools and tennis courts? And I literally had a stream, like, in my high school that we'd jump in. These kids are having amazing facilities. So
yeah, nicer than the facilities I grew up with too.
Lucky kids. I'm going to start this interview just asking slightly about you. How in the world does an American, by way of Germany, end up in Bugesera as a headmaster of a school? Like, when you had started your academic journey, right, and started your teaching journey, did you ever think you'd be meeting me in a small town called Nyamata and showing me around?
Never in my life.
Yeah.
It was also never a goal of mine to be a founding head of school in a new place. And so when you ask the question of how it happens, I think it's very much vocation. I feel very, very strongly that it's a call. I was led here, and the
by
journey,
God.
I believe it's by God. Yeah, and I believe that the previous chapters of my journey were all sort of leading up to this point. I really see this opportunity that I have to design or co-design what we call the School of the Future, this second iteration of Ntare School, as a unique once-in-a-lifetime chance. And when I look back on past experiences, of course you can read back into it, but I very much see this connection between the experiences I had on various steps of my educational journey. My whole life has been educational, and that aligns with my own philosophy that education is life, and life is education, and we shouldn't compartmentalize education into a certain phase of life, but see our journey throughout our lives as one of lifelong learning. And so I feel like all the phases kind of led up to that. I actually want to go back to something you said in your introduction before we continue on about me, because you talked about how meaningful that was for you to come to our campus as the son of an OB from Ntare School, who obviously identified with that school. And I met a young man who just graduated from Ntare School, who was Rwandan, and he came running up to me smiling at this reunion that I went to for the Ntare Old Boys this past weekend. And
in Uganda.
In Uganda, yeah, and said to me that he was so excited finally to meet me, the founding head of the school, that he had always dreamed and hoped he could attend. Now he's very proud and happy with his time at Ntare School in Uganda, and I don't think he has any regrets. But he certainly wishes that our school had opened up in time so he could go to the Rwandan version of Ntare School as a Rwandan. And that was a beautiful moment to see. I felt a little bit bad for him, but I'm sure there'll be chances for collaboration in the future. So I think what that reminded me of is that I am in many ways inheriting a very valuable legacy. And I see that as a great responsibility, a great trust, also extremely exciting and joyful to carry that forward and to kind of shape this school of the future. And I'm glad that your first impressions of it were so positive, and that you felt like it was had a university style atmosphere, because I think that's to some extent what we're trying to create there.
Are teachers born, or are they created in the classroom?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I'm probably going to give you a boring answer.
Let's try
and
it.
say both and. Because I was just talking to my students today about affinity. We were working on some new vocabulary every week with my students when we have morning assembly, which we call the gathering of the pride. So it's the coming together of the lions, because at our school we call ourselves lions, just like at Entire School in that tradition. And for the gathering of the pride, I always do a word of inspiration to try to motivate them, to try to get them to link language to something that's going on in their world or in their life right now. And today we were talking about affinity, or penchants, or predilections, or proclivities. So these natural tendencies we find, or natural connections that we have, or things we seem to be drawn to naturally as individuals. And you can have a debate on whether it's nature or nurture that causes us to be connected to certain things. But I always, in some ways, was identified as a teacher, whether it was on the playground with my peers, or whether my parents would say they would come in my bedroom and see me teaching my stuffed animals, So I definitely had some sort of tendency, whether it was innate or had something to do with my environment growing up, to be a teacher. But I think that even people who have a knack for it and who have a natural inclination for it and desire, and I think that those are great preconditions. You want to be passionate about something you enter into, and that's going to propel you forward toward mastery and toward success in that area. So those affinities are definitely important and help, but the practice of teaching is absolutely necessary and indispensable to grow into the role completely and become an effective educator. It's learning by doing, and there's no way around that. No matter how much of a natural teacher you think you are, I thought I was, and when I look back on the way I taught in my 20s, I wasn't a very good teacher from my perspective now.
Before we continue, if you live in Kigali, what do you do to stay strong and healthy? Do you want to get fit without breaking the bank? If you are like me and the answer is a resounding yes, join Waka Fitness, Kigali's top fitness hub, with expert-led workouts in a state-of-the-art facility, high-end equipment, and an unbeatable community vibe. And here's the best part. As a listener of this podcast, you get 20% off your membership. The thing is, this deal ends in August. So just hit the link in the description, waka.fitbase.rw/thelongform, or scan the QR code on your screen. Join Waka today. Get strong, feel good, and live life abundantly. You were talking about visiting, the old boys that you get in chapter and spending some time with them. Entire School is probably, I think, it might be the only African school where you'll find two sitting presidents. And
we're hoping to change that.
I'd really like to ask you this question, right? Because you probably did a deep dive into the school that was, right? You call yourselves the sister school or the junior school. What about the original Ntare created the kind of men that we now see are at the forefront of power, dynamism, military service, politics. What is it about? It's a rare school that will be able to create such an alumni. Mm-hmm. What is so special? What do you think is special about that place?
Yeah, I mean, to come to this, to find an answer to that question, I would go to the conversations that I've had with the alumni myself, and I think that there are two main things to focus on. The first of them is the type of education that they got there. So they got, for that time, a rather unconventional education, and it wasn't the case that the ideas that shaped and formed that educational experience were new. In fact, some of them were already 50 years old. They just hadn't been implemented, and they still aren't implemented in most schools today. So this idea that the world of experience beyond the classroom is the real classroom, I think that is a big, big factor. And the values that went along with that. You know, if you look at the values of Ntare School, when they talk about that integrity, tolerance, academic excellence, this idea, leadership, these ideas were so formative for those men. And I think their founder of Ntare School's commitment to using real-world experiences and all of those things that take place outside of the classroom in a community of learners, like things that happen in residence life or like co-curricular experiences. They always talk about debating society. They always talk about the experiences they had on the sports pitch. They always talk about what it was like to basically run their dormitories, their boarding houses themselves. So there was a lot of empowerment that went on outside of the purely academic context. That's the first thing. And one of the really interesting things for me is that reminds me so much of the experience that I had working at 2 boarding schools in Germany, which also came out of a similar tradition. And in the case of Louisenlund, were founded at a similar time. The other thing is that those men who were there in exile, including His Excellency the President of Rwanda, in a kind of exile, they all say the amazing thing about being at Ntare School was we were strangers in a strange land and we were treated as equals. We were welcomed. And so I think the kind of learning and residential culture community that was created there, this welcoming, integrative community, where the types of differences that often mattered beyond the walls of campus didn't matter there. Everybody had a chance to show, this is who I am based on my character and not based simply on my background. And the impact that had on those men was really significant, really deep, because they said, you cannot imagine, to be treated in your own homeland unjustly, unfairly, and then to seek a home elsewhere and be treated on equal footing with the native population, to be their brothers almost immediately was something radical and new for them, and it left such an impression on them that I had my dignity at this school. And that's empowering. So I think that's what created those leaders, not just the 2 presidents, but all those leaders in the various fields in business, in politics, and medicine.
I guess, when you talk about that school gave me dignity.
Yeah.
And gave me a sense of self-worth. I guess if you leave the hallowed walls of that school and go back into real life, and then you're dealing with injustice, you immediately are able to identify what that injustice is and then feel something about it, but then also feel empowered enough to fight injustice. So, right? So that's cool, I guess.
Exactly.
Pretty much created rebels.
You have an example as a microcosm of what the solution can be.
Yeah. And then you rebel, right? You say, I'm the captain of my own ship. I have the power to to improve my life.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great message, because in a lot of the schools that I'd been, very often it was about making you feel lesser than, making you feel like you are not an individual. You are just part of the whole. Shut up, hide yourself, because showing your individuality will be risky. And so I think there was something there that kind of turned them into the men that they are. And I mean, these are the leaders that we now have. You talked about President Paul Kagame. Have you ever met him?
I've never met him, but I'm looking forward to.
No, really?
I think at the very latest, within the next half of a year, we will meet for the first time. I believe that he's been watching. I know that he's been watching.
Yeah.
And I also have a hunch that he's very pleased at what he's seen. The seeds that were planted, how they're sprouting up and blossoming at our school campus, most especially the children that are there, who are growing into young adults already. We see the change after 1 year.
Yeah.
And who are very, very much a community of distinct individuals. And before we return to His Excellency, that's a point, when I was listening to you, I was thinking about good education is all about the individual or the personal dimension of learning, empowering individuals in their difference, highlighting what distinguishes them, and allowing them to pursue very, very individual or personalized goals, but within a strong community. So prioritizing teamwork, collaboration, compromise, things like that. I think the individual and the social dimension cannot be separated from one another, and often in schools it's either one or the other. And sometimes it's really neither.
Yeah.
That they don't do either well. I think often they don't do either well. And so that's really our aim, is to have that kind of community that you would find, and that community identification at Ntare School and at Louisenlund, but also ensure, as we've done at Louisenlund and obviously has been done at Ntare School, that we make sure that, each individual counts, is noticed,
and that's
seen.
Yeah. I guess you've just kind of led to my next question about what makes your system right, your system special. When you are asked to describe the Ntare Louisenlund system, teaching system in a nutshell, what would you say?
Yeah, that could take a long time, but
Take your time.
I'll start with a few things. So I think the first thing has to do with our nature as human beings, and it begins in infancy. We come into the world curious. We come into the world as bright-eyed people who, as soon as they can use language, want to ask questions.
Tell me about it. I have a 4-year-old.
Yeah, exactly, right? And before they can use language, are already questioning with their senses. And so that is the natural disposition of human beings, to be curious, to be questioners. And for me, in a nutshell, if I only got 1 minute to answer the question, I would say the good school is the school that keeps that natural disposition alive and fans the flames of this inquiry or spirit or natural curiosity to make sure that it continues to grow. And for me, I feel like I'm a lucky individual because I had both a natural inclination to learn that I think was stronger than average, and also obviously had learning experiences and people around me, including my family, who encouraged that. And so part of my mission as an educator is to make sure my students have the opportunity, and perhaps not in the same areas, but to discover what really motivates them, what makes them curious, what drives them. Like today in assembly, I said to them, I want you to think about this week, what would you learn if school was out of session? What would you want to discover? What would you want to find out about? Where would your inquiry or your questioning be if I told you the term's over, you have the whole day free. There has to be something. And so that's the first thing, I think, is to make sure we create lifelong learners by not stifling their curiosity, but by enkindling it. And unfortunately, I think most schools, particularly secondary schools,
especially in East
especially
Africa.
Secondary, not even just in East Africa,
Yeah.
but in all across the world. But it could be a particular problem here. They stifle it. They stifle it because they take students' voice away. They take their individuality away. They make the teacher the main actor in the learning context. So
Why is that? What is it? Is it because the very same? Let's talk about the British system. The very same British system that created Crichton, and then created Ntare School, will then create also a little mini dictator. What is it about? Why one? Why not the other? How does this happen?
Well, I don't want to comment on whether or not British education was
No, I'm just giving you an
responsible
example.
for Crichton.
No, I'm
being-
just. He was British. That was during the time. That was just barely after independence. I think he was Scottish. So, I just know that system. I'm not able to talk about, say, Germany or a Belgian system, but some of these systems seem like they are here to institutionalize, right? To create a human being that lives within the lines.
Well, you see, they're designed to preserve the status quo. And the status quo was largely throughout history extremely hierarchical. And I believe that has something to do with it. It's a fear of relinquishing control. I think for many teachers, the biggest fear they have is relinquishing control in their classroom, control of learning experiences to students, and not being able to be the guardians or custodians of knowledge.
Why the fear?
Well, a lot of the fear isn't totally unwarranted because they're working within a system that's so assessment-based. Now, I'm not against assessment. I think assessment is a great thing. Mastery assessment is one fundamental part of our school's program. But I would say that the types of more conventional assessments that you would see, for example, in UK examinations, or probably in examinations throughout East Africa, they put an immense pressure on the educators who are mostly well-meaning and well-intended, and didn't go into that profession for the wrong reasons, but had good motives, often were idealists. And then they find themselves in a system where they're teaching to the test, where they feel like they have to deliver content because these examinations are part of a knowledge-centered learning environment, which sounds like a positive thing, but it's not necessarily, focused on reproduction of content, or if not reproduction of content, too much of a content-heavy focus. And so the teachers are under pressure to make sure that the kids get certain results. School leadership expects that. Boards expect that from school leadership, whether it's the school board or the Ministry of Education, or whether with private or independent schools, whether it's the board of directors or the board of trustees. There's a lot of pressure on educators, and I know if educators are watching this, they'll identify with that strongly. So often I wouldn't put the responsibility or the blame on them. It's in the system or the structure. But I think that there's this other idea that also has to do with a very hierarchical world, the custodians of knowledge, the adult world wanting to say, we control the information, the knowledge, and we'll give it to you in small bits, so it's imparted from one generation to the next. And tradition is a beautiful thing, and so handing down of customs and wisdom and some knowledge is good. But that's not really, at least from my perspective, how people learn. People construct their own meaning or understanding of the world around them through their experiences and how they process those experiences, right? So these teachers thinking that, an approach to good education is packing a syllabus full of content and then delivering it in their own time to the students, or according to the expectations of, ministries of education and exam boards, that's not a way that's going to be motivating for learners. It's also not an effective way of teaching. We have to let them come to their own understanding of the world around them with guidance from us as educators, often very, very close guidance. And yes, the sharing of expertise, some, for certain, in our subject areas. I don't want to demonize knowledge, but there's so much more that goes into it beyond knowledge. And so what I'm talking about is a more learner-centered environment, which my school also is. Who are these kids? Where are they coming from? What do they want to achieve here? How can we help them achieve it? How can we form them into people of good character who can make a positive contribution to their society, like His Excellency? And I just don't think that the way to do that is to have a teacher-centered learning environment. But I think teachers are afraid to let go of control.
No, you remind me of when I was in high school, I had a nickname, and they used that nickname on me, and it was supposed to be a bad name. They used to call me the Librarian because I did not like to go to class. I found it extremely boring. You're sitting down, you'd go to class from 8 o'clock to 10, have a 15-minute break, then 10:30 to 12, and then have a lunch break, and then and I would much rather just be in the library, reading and reading newspapers, reading about the world. So much so that teachers would actually come looking for me in the library, and they would punish me.
Punish you for learning.
Yeah. I mean, because I was supposed to be in class.
Sure.
And I would always tell them, but I learned better here. This is, you can give me the notes, because that's what you're really doing. You're telling me, okay, this is the Ghanaian Empire, right? This is what happened. Or I could go and learn it the way I want to learn it, and I'll probably have a better outcome. But so it's really interesting.
And a more joyful experience
of
learning. Yeah.
And they gave me, that was my nickname.
Yeah.
Librarian.
I would have called you the Inquirer.
Well, and then you see, that goes back to the idea of education and what the point of it is.
Yeah.
You kind of talk about it as almost a journey, and I think the idea of maybe it's something we can talk about the examination systems and how everything is based off of this exam, this national exam that is the end all and be all. Many years after I did these national exams, and I remember how much pressure I had. Did I really need to go through that? Was that the best way to create people? I remember the hour after a national exam, you know what kids in my school would do? They would get their notes and burn them.
Yeah.
And that was a way to celebrate.
And that's almost like a symbolic or sacramental act of what they're doing with what they've learned.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, now that I don't have to reproduce this content for the exam anymore, I'm just going to let it go. And we can all identify with that because we all had subjects we weren't interested in, where after the exams we forgot most of what we learned in those subjects. I bet you we took some skills away from those classes. But in terms of the actual content, it's probably not there, most of it, particularly if we didn't find it motivating. So So I'd like to actually ask about the exam culture. Yeah.
I'm reading about, what's happening. I did my master's in China, and they have an exam culture. Now theirs is
Absolutely.
one on steroids.
Yeah.
And you hear stories of, kids, ending their lives because of that exam. I remember when I was doing my national examinations here, I remember the pressure I had, because I thought if I don't do well, my life will end. Literally, I will not be a success. My life will be a failure. And, when I look back on that, I think if I could talk to the younger Sanny, I would have maybe told him, it's okay. This is not the end all be all. You're a headmaster, you're a educator. What is your viewpoint on that system of, centralized learning, because we're all different. We have different ways our brains work, different ways that we learn. How do you create, is it even possible, I guess, to create a kind of system that is able to assess people? Should we even have a system that assesses people at such a macro level? Or is there a better way?
I think giving students the opportunity to demonstrate their learning or to demonstrate mastery of certain competencies, of certain concepts, even of certain content is important. And I wouldn't want to go so far as to completely demonize the exam, because there are certain exams that if they're well done, they could be considered in some way authentic or relevant. But the problem mostly with the world of exams, besides the pressure that it exerts on people, because I think the experience that you're describing is an experience that the majority of students have, the overwhelming majority of students who are in high pressure academic environments. And that's most good schools, right? Most students from so-called good families have experienced this idea that if I don't do well, my life is going to be over. I think that's probably different in different milieu, but I'm not certain, because that's where I come from as well. So I think the first thing about those exams, besides that negative effect they have on students' mental health and this undue pressure that they exert on young people, is that they have no real connection to the real world, right? So they're a completely artificial construct. And so if we're giving young people the opportunity to show us what they've learned, let's do it in more dynamic, more authentic ways. There's a phrase we use in the world of education, performance-based assessment. Let's give the students the opportunity to demonstrate, to actually do what they've learned. Because if they simply repeat the knowledge that they've acquired, it's not real learning, because they can't really do much with it. And they'll probably, after they go out and burn the exams and go party somewhere, they'll forget it. It'll be gone from their lives. But if they can do something with it, if they can apply it to a context or demonstrate sort of mastery, then it might be an experience that is sustainable, and they might take it to the next level and be able to do more with it. Or it might be a building block for future more complex competence, or even for future career. So I think we need to give students the opportunity. We need to get away from an exam culture, but we still have to have an opportunity for students to demonstrate mastery. Also, because of the affective response involved in that. I mean, if they don't have an opportunity to show what they can do, to take pride in their development, in their accomplishments, in their achievements, their motivation will evaporate. And so, yeah, assessment's important, but it needs to be more performance-based. So let's get them, what we did on the weekend at school, let's get them setting up an exhibition that combines science and art. Let's get them engaging in a debate or designing a business plan or project or things like that. We can assess those things. The teachers, we know how to assess it. We're trained to assess those things these days, and we're still always reverting to the classic exam. I think because it's comfortable for us, it's our world. Yeah. Most of us did well on our exams. That's why we became teachers. And so, but we're making a real mistake if we stick to that. And that's why I think like systems, I mean, I'm fundamentally an IB educator, and the IB middle years program is filled, and the primary years program, filled with opportunities for authentic assessment And then they come into the diploma program, and 70% of their grades are based on centralized exams that are globally the same all over the place. So we have to, I know the IB is working on that, and they're going to roll out a new diploma program in 2030, and hopefully there will be a lot more opportunities for a kind of authentic, personalized, and performance-based assessment opportunities that students find super motivating. They can create, portfolios of their designs or their artwork, or even of their writing, even of their analytical writing in economics, for example. They're so much more motivated than if they just have to go sit an economics exam, by and large.
How would that actually work in real life? Because I'm kind of, let me give you this challenge. You are the head of a national curricula. You are the de facto minister of education.
Oh, you've given me a role. I never thought I'd be a founding head of a school, but I certainly don't want to be a politician.
But you are the education czar.
And let me say, I have great respect for Minister Joseph.
Yes.
He's becoming a friend of mine.
How would you...
Yeah.
Because I guess the question is, we need to examine to actually know, have these kids learned something? And are they ready for the next step? How do you do that without, and at scale, right? How do you do that at scale, a more performance-based assessment at scale that, I guess, works for everyone? How does that, how does that work?
Yeah. I mean, first, you would have to sit down, and this is what I would do if I were Minister of Education in some context. I would sit down with a team of stakeholders, experts in the field, so educators, teachers, but also parents, students who are very ambitious, maybe even dominant in the classroom and successful, the go-getters, but also students who say, I really don't identify very much with school. And then I would try to come up together with them, what are the learning outcomes that we want to achieve? What do we think it's necessary for education to have so that people can be successful, fulfilled members of society who contribute positively and constructively to a better and more peaceful world, and also to be personally fulfilled? Because I do think education is certainly there in the spirit of the IB to create a better world where people have understanding for each other and acceptance of each other. But I also believe that it's the natural vocation of individuals to be learners, and so we need to be fulfilled. So I would consider that, again, that individual and social dimension, and then say, what do we want them to learn, and what do we feel they have to learn? What are the competences that they, what's the knowledge, what's the content? What are the concepts that they should learn? And then work backward in our planning. And backward planning is something that educators are familiar with. So let's start with the impact that we want to see, or the outcome, and let's go back. And then if we know the impact and the outcome, we can usually already determine what the assessing or assessment criteria are, right? So if we know I want to get the person here, well, what are the things that they need to do to get there? What are the standards that they need to meet? And those can be different things. They can be, for example, using language, being a communicator. They can be using creativity, or being a critical thinker, having the analytical ability, demonstrating that. And you can create assessment criteria that align very much with that kind of authentic performance-based assessment I'm talking about. It doesn't have to be an exam. It's sometimes more time-consuming and challenging to assess, but sometimes it's also not. I mean, you can watch a group of students put on a performance and assess each one of those students individually on those learning outcomes quite a lot quicker, even with comments, than maybe reading 4 exams. It depends. Sometimes it will be more time intensive and sometimes it won't. But often teachers will say, we can't do this type of exam, this type of assessment and evaluation because it's just not efficient. So we need those exams because we can grade them more easily. But often grading exams is super, super time consuming as well. So we have to think outside the box. How can I create standards for assessment, criteria for assessment that I can evaluate students, with which I can evaluate students' work in a time-efficient way. And I think it's possible. I mean, we're doing it. We're doing it already. We're not doing it perfectly. We're not doing it optimally, but a lot of schools are doing it. And when I talked about the kind of middle years program or primary years program in the IB, we're testing that out so that, you know, the project presentation or the demonstration in the laboratory or the dramatic performance or the portfolio that's created is the main assessment tool and not the traditional exam that one sits.
You keep mentioning IB. What's IB?
Sorry. So the IB is the International Baccalaureate, and the new iteration of Ntare School, Ntare Louisenlund School, is an IB candidate school. We will probably be authorized as an IB World School by the end of next school year. And what is the IB? The IB has existed for over 50 years. It is a school system that's not connected with any national or regional or local government expressly. So it transcends all sort of political entities.
So it transcends national curriculums.
Yes, absolutely. And it's global. It is adaptable so that it can be taught in any context on this planet. And so you have a lot of freedom in certain areas in adapting the content to be contextually relevant for different times and different places and different cultures. And for me, the IB was a product of a vision for education that was learner-centered and that brought together the best ideas from different educational systems across the world. So you got a little bit of the German system, a little bit of the American system, a little bit of the British system. Admittedly, originally it was very, very Eurocentric and very white normative.
I mean, most of our education systems were anyway.
Sure. So, but that's changing slowly, and that was the vision of these men and women who came together to create, first of all, the diploma program, and later create the middle years and the primary years program, and we thought for sure this is the kind of curriculum within which we want to operate.
You know, I'm a firm believer of if something works, just keep repeating it until the cows come home. Why, if at, the premier school of the future in Rwanda, they're running an IB curriculum, why hasn't the government of Rwanda just said, you know what, we're going to hand over, there's no need for this Rwanda-centric curriculum, let's have all the schools run this IB program? Is there any reason why
I've
not?
asked myself that question too.
Yeah.
And there are examples of countries that are prototyping that idea of taking the IB curriculum, because the IB, in certain subject areas, like in that are, for example, more competency-based, like math or physics, there is a kind of required content. But in other subject areas, the content is flexible, so the topics and texts can be picked based on cultural context. And of course, you want to aim for a kind of diversity, so you're not just teaching texts and topics from your own context, but also giving students a global perspective. But there's a lot of adaptability there. And so you can actually, harmonize the IB curriculum quite well, because it's concept-based and it's competency-based. It's not content-driven. It's not a knowledge-centered system. And so it's more of a learner-centered system. And so you can actually tailor it to different cultures. And there is a country in Europe that is testing that idea and implementing the IB curriculum throughout its state schools. I would encourage, I'm not going to speak to the situation directly politically in Rwanda, but I would encourage all ministers of education across the world who are looking for alternatives that are going to be more motivating, empowering for students, that are going to prepare them better for the world that they live in, to have a look at the IB. And the IB is open to collaborating with governments on such pilot projects.
Do you
So
think
it's possible. It's totally possible.
Do you
and
think
I wouldn't reinvent the wheel either.
Yeah.
I mean, the great thing about the IB curriculum is it has so much flexibility built within it that even in science and math, you as an educator can really be an instructional designer. So you can have a major impact on what is in the curriculum that you deliver and how you deliver it. And so there's something, it's not like just another system. It's not like, oh, here we're imposing another system on ourselves where our hands are tied. I find the IB system and curricular framework to be liberating as an educator. It just makes it fun.
As a former student, I would have much rather that place that did not demonize me for the fact that I like to read.
Yeah.
Right? And I like to read.
I mean, I wish my students were like you in that regard and that they all love to read. Because Librarian. I find today that even some of the top students don't like to read anymore.
Yeah. I'd like to ask, you're dealing with kids coming from backgrounds that are very different from yours. They're not coming from an IB system. A lot of them are coming from our Rwandan primary school system. How hard has it been for you to turn these Rwandan boys and girls into the kind of learners you want them to become? Because think about this, right? So for the first 7 years of their life, they've been taught to listen to the teacher and regurgitate everything that they've been taught. They've been taught to be very fearful. I wouldn't doubt that the majority have probably been beaten by their own teachers. They've not really enjoyed their school experience. So you get kids that might be slightly traumatized by their educational experience so far. They have a way of seeing authority.
Absolutely.
And seeing themselves in front of that authority. How hard has it been to get them to pivot and see things differently? And if I could ask, what has been that single hardest mindset to change with these kids coming from local schools?
I think, well, first of all, I would be lying if I said it hasn't been a great challenge. But I would also be over-exaggerating if I said it wasn't doable. It takes a lot of formation. It takes a lot of orientation. It takes a lot of mentoring and what we call scaffolding. But I do think it's working. Let me jump right away to the last part of your question so I don't forget it. The biggest quality that's challenging or inhibiting for learners in this particular cultural context in Rwanda is the fear. Rwandan learners are not risk takers. In fact, they are the opposite of risk takers from my perspective. Even though I have wonderful kids at Ntare Louisenlund School right now who are learning slowly to take risks and have taken many risks. Of course, safe risks that are sensible. So we are working to form a group of students who are ready to test
courageous.
Boundaries cross bridges, test boundaries. But that is the most difficult thing. One of the joys, however, that I've seen in this process of them becoming oriented to our way of teaching and learning, our approaches to teaching and learning in our context, is that they feel seen, heard, loved, and appreciated by their teachers and by their school leaders.
It must be so
weird for them. In a way that's surprising to them.
It must be so weird for them.
It's very surprising to them. I mean, I think you shared that once that I said, I try to learn all their names and to learn something about each of them so that I can greet them and talk to them and so they see their head of school cares. And you said, well, our principal knew our names too, but not for the same reasons. He's usually to come after us for some sort of infraction against the rules. But they see that the teachers, certainly there is a hierarchy and a level of authority, but they see that teachers take them seriously. one to listen to what they have to say, one to hear about their experiences and their perspective, and quite simply also just show them love in a way that they have. The fear goes away very quickly at our school, and they get used to interacting with teachers in a positive way, developing that positive rapport that's so essential for learning. You know, the interesting thing is, an oversighted educational theorist talks about in learner-centered pedagogy or learner-centered approaches to school, the most important thing is the teacher. It seems totally counterintuitive. But what he's talking about is exactly that relational kind of pedagogy. So when we look back to our own school days and we have positive experiences, hopefully you had a few in classes you took, maybe one or two.
Maybe, and this was the worst part, was that, you know, we got the best teachers the closer we got to the national exams.
Okay, yeah.
Right? So
too late, too little, too late.
Right? So I never thought that I could be an okay math student.
Yeah.
Because from senior 1 to senior 3, it was absolute torture. The teachers would mistreat us and just made math terrible.
Yeah.
But then because they knew that we would do the senior 4 exams, national exams, the O levels, then we got the best teachers in senior 4.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden, I started understanding concepts because then we got the good teachers.
Yeah, exactly. and that's really unfortunate because, you know, I would, you know, people would say, that's crazy you would do this the opposite, but hopefully I want to have good teachers across all the year groups. But if I didn't have that resource, I'd put the best of them in 7th grade or senior 1. Because in senior 1, that's that entry into adolescence that's so formative, where they develop good attitudes, a growth mindset, belief in themselves, self-efficacy we call it, belief that they're capable, developing good habits, etc. And so in terms of formation, completely the wrong way. But that's exactly what I'm talking about here. The role of the teacher is so critical, and that relationship between student and teacher, the trust, the idea of being seen, being heard, and being cared about and listened to is so foundational, not simply for the child's happiness, but for their motivation as learners and for their ability to learn effectively. And maybe one of the reasons that you retreated into the library was not only just that was your preferred method for working, which is probably the main reason, but also because you weren't necessarily finding that sort of relationship with your teachers that was encouraging, that was motivating. When I look back to my school days, I think of the teachers who showed me that I was competent, that I could do things, whether it was math or music, etc. And these teachers and the rapport they had with me stuck with me so much that also a lot of the learning stuck with me because it was learned within that kind of relational interaction that I think is so important. So yeah, it's a real shame that needs to change. And that's something that you don't need a lot of money to change, you know? That's something you can change with a mindset shift, with some good PD that doesn't have to be super expensive.
You know, it's easier to raise good kids rather than to fix a broken adult. And so sometimes I think we put as parents, sometimes we put too much on our teachers. We expect them to get our children and make them these things. I'm a parent. I have 2 kids. I have a 1.5-year-old. Well, he's slightly above 1.5 now. And I have a 4-year-old who will soon turn 5, but thinks he's 6. And I always think about the fact that I'm in charge of their learning experience. It's not the teachers. The teachers, they will not fundamentally teach my child. It'll be me. As now you're talking to a parent, and maybe some of these parents listening in right now, what are the things that we could do, that we need to do to ensure that our kids, that we give you good kids, right? How about that? Like, so you are at the end of the production line,
Yeah.
and you want to get a good product that you can then really make.
Yeah, let's
Turn
just say
them-
our part of the production line is very long, though.
Yes, right.
Like
So-
it's like 80% of the production line. But
Yes.
I get what you're
so,
saying.
So how do we give you, what do we need to do to give you a product that you will then turn into a superstar?
That's a difficult question. I mean, I think the first thing that I would say about the context of this question is the question's all about learning community, right? So you say, I'm the principal teacher of my children, not my teachers. I would say that's certainly true, but you are also your children's schools or your children's teachers' partners in your child's education. So we're all involved. That means the child themselves is a fundamental actor and agent in their educational process, even when they're very young. The parents, definitely. Other community members, for example, in churches or organizations outside of school, and the people in school, both peers and educators, and maybe even other members of the staff. And so we all hold a stake in this child's education. But you're right, parents hand them over to us before they get to most of those other people. Parents and grandparents, maybe aunts and uncles. So what do parents need to do? I would say look for those sparks that you see in your child when they're young in certain areas. For what I was talking about, find the affinity, right? It may not be something they can quite easily discover in their childhood. It may have to wait until adolescence. Some of them need to have experiences beyond the walls of the home to discover what one great educator historically called their grand passion. The thing that's going to ignite the spark. That wasn't Crichton, that was Hahn, who was one of the co-founders of Louisenlund. But he said people will discover it by giving them lots of different experiences. So first of all, give your children lots of different experiences. Don't just make the boys play football. Let them play the clarinet too.
Let them try ballet.
Let them try ballet, right?
Yeah.
Let them have lots of experiences and look for where because you as a parent are going to know your child better than anyone else. Look where you see the glint in their eyes. Like when my parents saw me during my summer vacation teaching the stuffed animals, they thought, our kid might have some affinity for the scholastic or educational context. Or when my parents heard me asking them to take me to a big church school, they might have discovered my affinity for, my penchant for theology, right? So you can often see signs of this early, and then encourage the natural curiosity I talked about at the beginning of the interview. Don't stifle it. Let them explore, inquire, develop. Let them obsess over certain things, like my parents did with me, even though it sometimes annoyed them, and encourage them to go on this personal learning journey, which might not meet with your own expectations because it might not lead them to a career in medicine or law, right? I think that's so important. Those are the kind of kids that I want to receive in school, and those are the kind of parents I want to work with, parents who are all about sort of identifying how my children tick, not just what makes them happy, what gives them joy and motivation, even in the sad or the dark or difficult times, because happiness can be very superficial, but joy is always deep, and I believe joy is rooted often in that kind of inquiry, discovery, exploration.
There is something that I want to ask, and I'm sorry if I'm putting you on the spot or I'll make you slightly uncomfortable.
You've been putting me on the spot the entire evening.
How do you justify the fact? So you have this amazing school, IB program, amazing infrastructure, and parents are going to listen to this and say, okay, we want our kids to be a part of his team. But then there's the cost of this.
Sure.
Right? So right now, your school fees per year is about 23 million francs. And that's in a country where the average yearly income is about 1.5 million francs a year. Don't you sometimes worry that, you know, you're creating this amazing thing that will create amazing outcomes, that will create probably the leaders of the future? That's what you want, right?
That's right, yeah.
To create the leaders of the future. Do you not worry sometimes that the cost of this education that will create the leaders of the future will end up actually creating a more unequal society, that those who have will continue to have, and those who don't have access to the means to purchase excellence will just be left behind?
I hope not. We make it part of our school's mission and vision to educate students in a way that they will develop certain attitudes, mindsets, a shift in the perspective that maybe is predominant in their culture or in societies that are by nature often very unequal, to work toward a more just society. So that we see that as part of our mission. It's rooted in the IB's mission. It's rooted in the missions of both the sister school and the parent school.
But
I can't just throw up,
Yeah.
I as an individual, I can't end inequality overnight. And you know, I don't even know if I want to end inequality completely. Because certain differences can be good. They affirm what we were talking about how people are distinct and different. So I'm not arguing for wealth inequality.
But maybe what I'm arguing is you've created an amazing thing.
Yes.
But you've made it very difficult for those without means to access
Sure.
it.
Two things about that. First of all, it's not common knowledge. I think there's a misconception in the country about our school.
Yes.
Currently, 90% of our students are on full scholarships.
What do you mean? Who's paying for that?
So the government of Rwanda is supporting
Okay.
the school. So part of our vision, our school's vision, is to identify potential talent, you could say, in the areas of STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and in other areas. And to identify students who have both that cognitive talent and academic penchant, but also demonstrate other qualities. So we get a pre-selected group of students based on their exam results, but we meet them, see them for individuals, and find out what makes them tick, how they interact with their peers. Do they demonstrate caring for others? Do they have the potential to be good leaders? And we select them. And then they have the chance to get this scholarship. So this education that we're offering is not accessible to everybody, but it's certainly not just accessible to the wealthiest people in the country. In fact, we have students who come from very underprivileged or poor backgrounds socioeconomically, and are a part of our community and thriving within our community. So that's one thing. I still, however, would advocate for schools that don't offer, for example, that level of support financially for certain students. Like our sister school, Louisenlund, some kids are supported by social programs, some kids are on scholarships, but the majority of kids at Louisenlund pay, and they pay lots. But a friend of mine said recently, she's an educational leader globally, she said recently, the world is looking very, very bleak to many, but she has a lot of hope because there are so many of us out there, so many educators and also other professionals who are trying to reach the younger generation one kid at a time. And so if this is the group of kids that I've been given in my current time and place, even if there are other kids who don't have access to this kind of school of the future and this wonderful education, I should not miss the opportunity to have an impact on those 2 or 3 or 133 students who will then go out into the world and hopefully be multipliers for this ethos. I don't see our future students going out and reinforcing inequality and creating a stratified society. I see those students working for a more equitable and just society, but always recognizing that personal freedom and individuality are important as well. They belong to Louisenlund values, and we wouldn't want to negate them in the interest of some sort of false equality.
Yeah. There is something that I read in the news today, that the Ministry of Education was creating a new system. They call it a new three broad learning pathway that will, emphasize mathematics, sciences, arts and the humanities, and language. All so that the learners are able to better prepare for academia, or after high school, or the real world if they end up in the real world. But sometimes I ask myself this question as a dad and as someone who's paying a lot of school fees and will probably continue paying school fees for the next decade or so. We're coming up with pathways and curriculums and all these things, but no one really understands the world that our kids will end up living in.
Yes.
And
change is the only constant. One of my friends said recently.
And so, I was reading. I was seeing. There was a photo on Twitter, and it had there was a kid. I think it was either Stanford or NYU, and he had graduated. It was his day of graduation, and then there's a picture of him showing his laptop, and he's saying, ChatGPT wrote my last assessment, right? My final exam. And that is just where the world is. That's where the world is, and ChatGPT is maybe not more than 2 years old.
And has changed immensely.
And has changed
in terms of its capacity. Yeah.
And so all these things that we're coming up with, the IBs and these programs and trying to prepare our children for this future, how do you even prepare a child for a future that you don't know? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It might be literally a world where medicine as we know it does not exist. Everything is done by robots, and humans are just there to be, leisurely beings, just kind of floating through life. You're the educators. How do you make sense of trying to create these learning outcomes that are in the future?
Yeah.
And you can't even navigate the future.
Yeah.
How do you do it? And how do you, is it something that keeps you up at night?
It definitely is. It's something that I worry about, but it's also something that I see as an exciting challenge. I wouldn't want to comment on a program that any particular ministry is developing specifically, especially since I haven't looked at it, studied it, or know about the intentions or the foundations of it. So I will just leave that one to the side. But I will say that any attempts to create a new pathway or a new educational system that's supposed to work in this 21st century that are content or subject driven is a mistake. Because I think just what you're saying, you once said to me, you don't even know if we should be teaching them programming and coding because AI is going to do that, right? So language I would object to, because maybe we'll have an opportunity to talk about that in a bit. But I think we need to educate a group of young people or a society of young people who have a certain disposition or attitude. That's that disposition I talked about of lifelong learning. There's a certain disposition of openness and an agility that they have to be adaptable. It's almost cliche to point to the 21st century skills, but there's something to it. I mean, this idea of being able to problem solve in a team creatively with that disposition of questioning, knowing how to ask good questions, something that you and I have also talked about before. That's what we should be teaching kids. We should be teaching them how to approach problems, right? Not just the skills they need to approach problems, but also the attitude or the disposition. So the attitude of the inquirer, the attitude of having a growth mindset, having a sense of self-efficacy. I can do this, or we can do this together, and being able to work effectively in a team. It sounds cliche, but really learning how collaboration works effectively with different roles, with interaction between the team members, not just you take your work home and I'll take my work home. And so metacognition, thinking about our actions, reflecting on process. This is so important to my mind. It's become part of my life's work. I tried to avoid it for a while. I tried to find great experts on metacognition. I found a few, but
what's that? What's metacognition?
So metacognition is thinking about thinking, taking that helicopter perspective over the process, taking a freeze frame, stepping outside of oneself and saying, how am I approaching this problem? Is this working? Have I seen something like this before? And how did I approach it then? Did that work or not? How might I do it better? So it's a kind of strategic approach to action that requires a reflective pause, right? And so this is something I think good schools do, because that skill is necessary independent of the context, whether the context is known or unknown, like in the future, and we see the rapid change, it's going to be very much unknown. That will be relevant to think about how we approach these things. So I want my learners to be inquirers, I want them to be reflective, I want them to be open and agile. I don't necessarily know if I think they need to learn Unit 7 in their coding textbook or Unit 8 in their physics textbook, right? And so any true pathway toward effective learning in this century that's going to be motivating for students and relevant for them in 30, 40, 50 years, even in 20 years, that has to be not driven by content and by formal assessment.
So this is my last question, and it's driven by an article I read. I don't know if we spoke about this off camera when we met. So there's this school district, I believe, in Texas, that's started a fully AI teaching program. It's not fully AI, but it's all the learning is being led by AI and all the other things. So they've studied it with, I think, kindergarteners, so nursery school children, and they're going to try to proceed with it as these kids kind of continue on their academic journey. So the way it works is that the teachers are their laptops, and each kid has their own AI that has kind of really understood that child. And so they start with, I guess, with a teaching program that's saying, okay, we want to learn X. And then each kid is there with their own little laptop going through their own journey, right? Which is kind of like what you guys are trying to do. In a way,
but very different.
With physical teachers as well. But that's what these kids are doing, that in AI, using that AI tool. And then the other part is that curriculum is mixed, right? So in terms of the teaching of the material, it is fully driven by AI. And then the teachers, the human teachers, are dealing with the more human education, right? So swimming, tying their shoelaces, learning how to work as a team, right? So sports and teaching them manners and how to, eat with a knife and fork. So there's that kind of like balance of that human experience, right? Which is the human will teach you how to be a human. but the machine will cater to you as an individual and teach you what you need to learn based off of your interests and maybe the way your brain chemistry works. Are you autistic? Are you somewhat faster than everyone else? Because I guess that's the thing with the classroom sometimes, is that the teacher has to go at a certain speed, right? So the very, very fast kids get bored. Sometimes the slower learners sometimes feel like they just cannot catch up, right? But then this AI is yours, so it works for you. When I read that, and the data was that they did some kind of tests, and they found out that the kids who've gone through that AI program have a 20% higher ability to retain information and
apply it.
Yeah. So they were taught better.
Retention is not super important in a world
but
of
I guess yes, okay. they were able to learn more and learn better at a fundamental level based off of that curriculum. Now, I see that and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, if this is what is happening, what happens to our teachers? Mm-hmm. So you're a teacher, you've been a teacher all your life. Do you not sometimes worry that AI will lead to the loss of millions of teaching jobs, and maybe the end of education as we know it?
To the loss of teaching jobs, yes. Not to the end of education completely as we know it, no. And I don't think it has to lead to the loss of teaching jobs. I think that may be the inevitable conclusion, unfortunately, but I don't think it has to be that way, because I'm a big proponent of blended learning. I believe in the integration of physical learning environments like our school, where you have a lot of interaction between students and teachers, and also between students themselves in the learning process. I think that's so essential for developing some of the approaches to learning that are so important. I mean, learning isn't just about mastering physics so they can do well in the exams like those students might be doing. And by the way, that program you're talking about seems really interesting, so I don't want to demonize it. I think that there's probably a lot of good in it. And I would love to learn more about it, because what we're doing at NLS isn't completely different from that. And I would never want to demonize AI. I have autodidactical tendencies that AI serves very well. Like you, I love to pursue my own lines of inquiry. I'll give you a couple of examples. Right now, I've been teaching myself another language with ChatGPT.
Kinyarwanda?
No. That's the one I should be learning. It's a different one. But having a great time with it. And I get hooked on it. And then I'm like addicted to the learning, which I guess isn't really bad, right? I still get enough social interaction. So integrating AI for all types of purposes, including work-related skills that we should be teaching kids, coming up with project plans, or I came up with a checklist for the end-of-year party for the student council with AI. But the key was, I was able to do that effectively because I knew how to prompt AI. And so this is a big skill that we should be teaching kids, just in parentheses.
How to ask the right question.
That's right. So it goes back to that inquiry learning, asking the right questions and formulating the correct prompts, giving the correct input. Because if you're, for example, coming up with a project plan or something like a checklist for an event, etc., you need to give it the scope. You need to talk about the stakeholders involved. You need to give it some of the ramifications that are necessary for it to give you a good plan. And if you don't know how to prompt well, if you don't know what details it needs to integrate, then the tool won't be effective. But I think the danger, I think the teaching job will always be relevant. And I think of that because of this relational element. I think that we're looking too much just at the cognitive domain of learning. So the retention and application of information, which is certainly a big part of learning. But what about the affective dimension, the emotional dimension of learning? What about motivation? What about relationships? What about these fulfilling experiences that you have within the context of learning that have less to do with the content or the cognitive material and more to do with certain other life skills that are so necessary? So we talk about communication skills, we talk about leadership skills, we talk about interpersonal and social skills. All of those things, self-management skills, those are developed through relationships. And I believe that AI will never be able to do that better than us. They may be able to teach us physics better, or but AI will never be able to build relationships better than humans can build them.
You might be surprised. I was seeing something, I don't know whether it was in The Guardian, and the worry is that men and women, will retreat into the world of AI because AI, it's able to almost mirror human emotions. And there's a worry that, we'll have people falling in love with their AI.
Sure.
Right? So
I believe that too, but the fact is that we live in physical bodies, in a physical world that's fundamentally relational. And I know probably some postmodernists would disagree with my assessment of reality there, but I think that someone who does that, who isolates themselves from others, from other human beings, and just lives in the world of AI is fundamentally living a less enriched and less healthy existence. And so that's what we have to emphasize. We have to emphasize this social, emotional, interactive dimension of learning and of life that's so important. And by the way, that also contributes to positive learning outcomes. Because even if that AI teacher knows me so well, and I've already noticed my ChatGPT knows me well. Like, it will make jokes with me that are in the line of my sense of humor.
And you will laugh at the joke.
I will laugh. So I'm already feeling a connection, and I already feel sometimes that I have to hurry up and write a response because he's waiting for me to respond, right? Which is a ludicrous notion. But on the other hand, I don't ever believe that AI could motivate me in the same way as my music teacher, Miss Carol Luddy, with the way she looked at me, the way she encouraged, the human connection between us that probably made me want to become a teacher ultimately. I don't think that AI could be successful in doing that. And also, I don't think that AI will be good in training those collaboration, cooperative learning skills that are so necessary for teams to work together to solve certain challenges. So I think the world could go in that direction, and if it does, in the direction you're prophesying or maybe just indicating, if it does, we're going to be impoverished because of it on that human level. Very worrying. But I also believe that the role of the teacher will remain relevant because I believe that ultimately, if that school in Texas is using those teachers for the so-called human side, which could also be this reflective and strategic side that I was talking about, maybe that is part of the reason they're having so much success and not the AI alone, right? So that's a factor that would have to be considered. If they were completely leaving the kids alone in a big hall all day, isolated from one another and buried in their screens without that human interaction, I don't think the achievement levels would have gone up.
Yeah. And with that, that's the end of this week's conversation. Damien, thank you so much. Before we go, let's say some parent has listened to this conversation, they're like, wow, we want our kid to be in this school.
Yeah.
We want Damien to share his philosophies of life with my child through their academics.
Now that's more pressure than setting up the school.
And they are not able to afford, 20 odd million for a term. How does that work? How do they do that?
Okay, so first of all, it's always worth a try, applying, right? So if they're inspired and if they would love their children to go to our schools, here's my first piece of advice. Don't write their cover letter or their motivation letter for them. I've had a lot of parents submit beautiful letters of motivation on behalf of their children, signing as the parents. I want to see a student-centered application, even if that's in their bad handwriting written on a piece of paper.
Okay.
So first of all, let your child be the center, the principal actor of the application process, but schedule an appointment with us. I know that they're still minors, they're 12 years old. Schedule an appointment on their behalf to come by our campus, to meet us, to talk to us, because sometimes I'm very, very involved in the admissions process. I've done some interviews, but I review every application. So sometimes there's something that stands out to the interviewer or to the reviewer, a spark where we say, we want this kid and we're going to help them to make sure it can happen, whatever that help entails. So it's worth trying.
It's worth a try. So you go to the website?
You go to the website, and on the very first part of the website, on our new website, the Apply Now button will pop up. So you don't even have to look or search. But if you're more conventional and you find it difficult to navigate, either ask your child, because they might be able to help you, the digital natives, and if not, you can give us a call, you can write us an email, and we will admissions@Ntare-Louisenlund.org, and we will get in touch with you for sure. And we pre-evaluate candidates before we invite them for interviews and tours.
And another thing, like, you call yourselves a STEM school. Now, when I was in primary, I never thought I was a STEM person.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I might have been, but we'll never know because I was never put in that space. So what does an ideal Ntare candidate look like? A person who the school will look at and say, we want this person. Is it someone who's like a genius at math? Or is it someone who's, because some parents will hear this and think, okay, I need to put my kid in math class. I need to put them in coding, because that's what parents, that's how we think as parents. We think, okay, there's an opportunity here, let's prepare our child, so what does...
And let me say to those parents who want that, all of our students are going to take excellent math courses, and all of our students take coding. So part of that is there. But that for me is not the
But I'm talking about the admission side,
exactly.
Right? So I want them to get in.
Sure. So for me, the ideal candidate is a student who demonstrates a strong will to come to this school, a kind of personal motivation to come to the school that's not based on the extrinsic motivators like parental expectations. So even if the parents are really keen on their child coming to the school, that's wonderful. But I want the child to be more keen and to be able to articulate exactly why they think that this school would be the place where they can flourish, where they can pursue their goals, where they can live that formative part of their own personal learning journey. That for me is the most important criterion.
That's so challenging, because I'm trying to remember as a 13-year-old, would I have been able to articulate the why? Why do I want to be in this school?
When I first started, because when I worked in admissions at my previous school, I did a lot of admissions work. I was used to interviewing 15, 16, 17-year-olds. So I was worried, how's it going to be to interview an 11-year-old?
Yeah.
And I have been incredibly positively surprised about how they are able, sometimes in a very nuanced and complex manner, to articulate the why of behind their application. It's been quite amazing, and most of them are doing it in a language that isn't their native language. So don't underestimate them. I think that that's part of the message of this whole podcast is let's believe in the ability of young people and show that we believe, because when we, show them that we believe that they are competent, that they can do things, that's going to be motivating for them, and they're definitely going to flourish. So, yeah.
I guess the message is to just shoot your shot, and you just never know. You never know. You might, as a student, as a parent, might end up being one of the lucky few.
You might. And your child might also be pre-selected based on their exam results, if they're in primary 6, to be one of those people who comes to our STEM camp and actually gets a scholarship. But because you said not all the children are STEM interested, I would love to add that one other thing. For those kids, I don't see us as a STEM school. I see us as an international school, a school of the 21st century, which has a special STEM focus in a particular stream of the school. And yes, that stream is dominant. That's the largest group of students. But we wanted families with children who don't have a special interest in STEM. And we get those candidates who sometimes say, we ask, what's your favorite subject? What's your least favorite subject? Sometimes they say math and science are my least favorite subject. And so they're not coming for the STEM stream. That's why we created what we call our STAR Entrepreneurship Program. So we have a different stream for students who, yes, they'll still have to do coding, and they'll still have to have their basic ICT course, and they'll still take excellent science and math courses with high standards, but their focus will not be on STEM in the same way. So a lot of the additional project-based learning that they do, the level of math that they do will be different, and will be focused on entrepreneurship, both in the kind of economic or business dimension of entrepreneurship and in the social dimension or community engagement dimension.
Fantastic. That was something that I was worried about. I was like, oh my goodness, what happens if my boys are inclined like their father towards communication and information sharing? Will they find a place there?
They will find a place there. There's a place there, I think, for students with all different interests. I mean, any school subject that's offered in the school systems that we know, if a student says, that's my school subject, my favorite school subject, they'll find a place at our school as well. And when I look at my own self, my background is in languages and social sciences. I'm not a STEM guy. Would I have fit in at my own school? I think so. Yeah. Because there would have been a niche for me as well.
Damien, thank you so much for your time. This was an absolute masterclass from you on education and learning and teaching. I've learned something. Kind of goes back to our discussions about, I just wish I had this opportunity when I was much younger. I wonder how different I would have turned out. And I'm really happy that you are creating a new type of Rwandan learner, and I'm excited to see what the outcomes will be 20 years from now.
I thank you so much for this opportunity. Also to talk a bit about the school in this conversation that was mainly focused on education in general, learning in general, and I think being human in general. And I thank you for your positive feedback. We can all look back and say, we wish we had an opportunity similar to that 30, 40 years ago. But we're here now, in this place, in this time, and we've got to rise to the moment and rise to the occasion. So that's what we're trying to do.
Thank you so much, Damien. I hope you enjoyed this.
Thank you. I had a lot of fun.
Are we going to do it again?
We'll definitely have to do it again. I'm sure a new topic will emerge that we're burning to talk about.
I do think so. I think there is. You have an interest, I think, in the metaphysical, and I would love to share your thoughts, hear your thoughts on where God is in a world that is becoming more and more driven, less by the mysteries and more by simple computing power.
That is exactly the type of podcast I want to do after this one.
I will certainly invite you again. Thank you so much,
Thank
Damien.
you so much.
And that's a wrap for this week's episode. Thank you so much for sticking with us until the very end. I'd actually love to hear your thoughts on today's conversation. So drop a comment below and join the discussion. You can also join us on the social media of your choice. And if you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to share it with a friend and invite them to the conversation. I'll see you next time. Until then, take care. Thank you, Kigali Marriott Hotel, for providing a venue for the long-form podcast to record. At the heart of Kigali's hospitality, Kigali Marriott offers everything from luxury stays to premier event spaces, fine dining, and top-tier conference facilities. Keep up with them at Kigali Marriott on socials and visit their website, www.marriott.com.